Have you ever noticed how you apologize for things that were never your fault? How the words, "I'm sorry," slip out of your mouth before you even think, as if your existence itself requires constant justification. You say, "It's fine," when it isn't. You swallow your frustration to keep the peace. You smile, even when something inside you is quietly collapsing. You take responsibility for the comfort of others, while no one seems to notice when you're the one unraveling. And the most painful part is that it looks so normal on the outside. People might even admire you for being understanding, patient, kind. They don't see the tremor behind your calm. They don't see that you have learned to disappear just enough so no one leaves, no one gets hurt, and no one becomes disappointed with you. You learned to make yourself small in order to feel safe. This is self-abandonment, but not in the way people imagine. It is not laziness or weakness or a lack of identity. It is a survival instinct, a reflex your body learned long ago, at a time when expressing your needs felt dangerous. When the people who were meant to love you either could not handle your emotions or made you believe your silence was the only way to be accepted. A child doesn't say, "My caregiver is emotionally unavailable." A child says, "Something must be wrong with me." So you adjusted, you softened your voice, you studied moods before speaking. You learned to anticipate needs before they were spoken. Because love, to you, was something earned, not given. And so, without realizing, you built a life where your own needs became negotiable, where you measure your worth by how useful you are, where you feel guilty the moment you take up space. You didn't choose this. You didn't decide one day to betray yourself. It was simply the cost of belonging. But what happens to a person who spends years dissolving themselves just to keep others close? What happens when you've become so attuned to other people's feelings that you no longer recognize your own? When your peace depends on everyone else being okay, while you remain invisible in the background? This story, your story, didn't begin in adulthood. It began in childhood, in rooms where silence felt safer than truth. And to understand how to return to yourself, we must go back to where you first learned to leave. Have you ever wondered why you learned to stay quiet, even when something in you was begging to speak? It didn't start in adulthood. It began when you were small enough to look up at the world and assume everyone else was right about who you should be. In that early world, love wasn't simply given, it had rules, conditions, expectations. You may not remember the exact moments, but your body does. There were days when your laughter was welcomed, and days when it was too much. Times when your emotions were met with sighs, silence, or anger. Slowly, you learned that love had a price. You learned to read the room like a weather forecaster, scanning faces for storms. You learned to sense tension before words were spoken. You learned to protect yourself, not by crying louder, but by needing less. A child does not think, "My parents are overwhelmed." A child thinks, "I must be the problem." So you adjusted. You softened your steps. You measured your tone. You waited for the right moment to feel anything at all. You became responsible for the emotional climate of the home, long before you even understood what responsibility meant. And when you cried, and someone told you to stop, not because they didn't care, but because they didn't know how to hold your feelings, that's when the first fracture formed. You didn't stop feeling. You simply learned to feel silently. When you were praised for being easy, mature, calm, you didn't realize that what they really meant was that you had learned to disappear. Your needs tucked themselves behind your ribs, like small frightened animals making themselves quiet to avoid being noticed. Psychologists call this conditional belonging. The nervous system learns that safety comes from compliance. Attachment theory explains that when a caregiver is inconsistent, the child becomes hyper-attuned to their emotions, often more aware of others than themselves. You became your own caretaker, soothing your fears alone, holding your tears until the door was closed, teaching yourself to be your own comfort because no one else knew how. A belief took root inside you, not spoken, not taught, but absorbed like air. To be loved, I must disappear. It became your first identity, your first rule, your first survival technique. And the thing about childhood survival strategies is that the body never forgets them. Even when you grow, even when you move away, even when life changes, that quiet, watchful child stays inside you, still trying to earn a love that should have never needed earning. The child who silenced themselves never really left, they just grew up. Have you ever noticed how, somewhere along the way, you became the one who always holds everything together? The one people come to when they're hurting, confused, overwhelmed. The one who listens quietly, nods gently, and says the right thing at the right time. It looks like maturity. It looks like strength. But sometimes, what looks like emotional strength is simply the art of never letting yourself need anything in return. Because when you grew up, you didn't lose the child who learned to stay small, you simply learned to disguise them. You learned to smile in a way that reassures others. You learned to speak in a tone that keeps peace. You learned to give endlessly, instinctively, without being asked. Not because you are naturally selfless, but because somewhere in your body, the old lesson still echoes. Love is safest when you take up the least space. And so, in adulthood, you become the peacemaker, the reliable one, the strong one. People admire your calmness, your patience, your ability to stay composed even when life feels heavy. They say you're selfless, emotionally wise, a grounding presence. But they don't see the quiet exhaustion behind it. The way your heart tightens when someone offers you support. How uncomfortable you feel when you are the one being seen. How praise makes you anxious because it threatens to expose the parts of you you've kept hidden, the parts that still long to be held. You wear a mask, not of deception, but of survival, a mask of competence, kindness, and unwavering stability. You become like a house where every room is unlocked for others, always open, always welcoming, yet no one is ever allowed past the threshold into the quiet rooms where your own needs wait in the dark. And in relationships, you confuse closeness with self-erasure. You give more than you have, you say yes, when every part of you wants to say no. You avoid conflict not because you are peaceful, but because conflict feels like the first step toward abandonment. You choose partners, friends, and dynamics where you pour and pour, believing that if you love hard enough, you will finally be chosen. But all that happens is that you disappear again, just like before. And sometimes, in the stillest moments, when the world goes quiet and no one needs you, a frightening question rises. Who am I when I am not holding someone else together? And that question is where the shadow begins, where the cost of self-abandonment starts to reveal itself. Why is it that, even now, your first instinct is to please? Why does your chest tighten at the slightest hint of someone's disappointment? Why does a simple disagreement feel like a threat rather than just two different opinions? It's not because you are weak. It's because your nervous system learned long ago that love and safety were conditional, and the body remembers what the mind forgets. Psychologists call this the fawning response, a lesser-known survival instinct within attachment theory. When a child grows up, sensing that connection can be withdrawn, they don't fight or flee, they adapt. They learn to soothe others, to appease, to merge into what will keep the peace. The nervous system becomes trained to believe that if they are okay with me, then I am safe. And so, even in adulthood, your body reacts to rejection the way one might react to danger. Polyvagal theory explains this with startling clarity. The vagus nerve, which regulates your emotional safety, begins equating conflict with threat. Disagreement feels like abandonment. Disapproval feels like danger. You feel it physically, the tightening throat, the shallow breath, the racing heart. Your body tries to protect you, the only way it knows how, by making you shrink, soften, or disappear to restore safety. Self-abandonment, then, is not a personality flaw, it is a pattern of the nervous system. A reflex, a survival code written in the language of fear and memory. When you say it's fine, while something inside you aches, your brain is not lying, it's protecting you from what it once believed could break you. And the belief beneath it all is painfully simple. If I disappoint you, I might lose you. The strategy that once saved you is now suffocating you. You are no longer that child. You are not living in those rooms anymore. Yet, the old emotional script still plays on repeat, convincing you that being known is dangerous and being small is safe. You adapted brilliantly. You survived with grace. Your ability to anticipate others, to sense emotional currents, to comfort, to understand these are remarkable skills. They are not to be shamed. They were intelligent responses to the environment you were given. But survival patterns are meant to be temporary. When they linger into adulthood, they turn from protection into prison, and sooner or later, you begin to feel the cost of living as a ghost in your own life. Have you ever noticed how the more you give, the more invisible you begin to feel? At first, your generosity seems like love. Your willingness to understand others feels like maturity, but slowly, quietly, something begins to hollow out inside you. Because when you spend your life prioritizing others, you don't just lose time or energy, you lose pieces of yourself. There comes a moment, maybe late at night, maybe after a conversation where you once again said, "It's okay," while your chest tightened when you feel it. A quiet resentment, like a slow-burning ember. Not anger toward others, but a sorrow toward yourself. You wonder why no one asks how you're doing, why no one notices when you are the one in need. Yet you push that thought away because you were taught to expect nothing, to love without asking anything in return, to disappear gracefully. And so you love harder, you give more. You offer your heart, your time, your emotional labor, believing that if you just love deeply enough, eventually someone will love you back in the same way. But the truth is painful. Those who constantly give are often drawn to those who constantly take. Takers recognize the softness in you, the willingness to bend, the absence of boundaries. And so you become the one who listens while no one listens to you, the one who understands while no one tries to understand you. You find yourself in relationships, romantic, familial, friendships, where you are valued for your presence but not truly seen. You become the emotional caretaker, the quiet supporter, the one who absorbs storms but never creates waves. You are appreciated for what you provide, not for who you are. The shadow of self-abandonment is not loud. It does not explode. It erodes, slowly, quietly, the way water smooths stone. The longer you neglect your own needs, the less you recognize yourself. You become a blurred outline of a person present in everyone's life, yet absent in your own. You laugh at the right moments. You show up when needed. You give warmth, stability, reassurance. But inside, there is an emptiness that nothing seems to fill. You become a ghost in your own life, seen everywhere, but never known. And the most haunting part is realizing that the world does not notice your disappearance because you trained it not to. But ghosts do not stay silent forever. There comes a point when the hollow space inside demands to be acknowledged, and that is where the unraveling begins. Have you ever wondered why it feels noble to ignore your own needs? Why self-sacrifice is seen as virtue, while self-respect is mistaken for selfishness? You didn't invent that belief. You inherited it. The world around you has been teaching it to you since you could speak. From the beginning, society creates roles so subtle you barely notice them forming. If you were a girl, you were praised for being gentle, accommodating, nurturing, a good woman, the kind who bends before she breaks, who smiles even when she's tired, who loves others more than she ever loves herself. If you were a boy, you were told to be strong, composed, unshaken, a protector who never cries, never falters, never shows the tenderness that lives beneath the surface. Both roles teach the same lie. Your emotions are inconvenient, so you learn to hide them, to swallow your needs so others could feel comfortable. You learned that affection is given to those who don't ask for too much, praise is given to those who endure quietly, and belonging is gifted to those who perform the version of themselves that others prefer. You saw movies where the hero is the one who carries everyone else's pain and never speaks of his own. You heard stories where the good woman is the one who gives until she is empty. You internalized that to be worthy is to disappear with grace. And then you grew up. In friendships, you became the reliable one, the one who listens, the one who stays up until 2 a.m., calming someone else's storm. Yet you hesitate to send a message when your own world is falling apart. In relationships, you offer emotional labor without language. You understand before being understood. You fix before being asked. You stretch yourself thin, and the world calls it love. The truth is, modern culture rewards the person who holds everything together, not the person who dares to break open honestly. We applaud endurance. We celebrate strength, but rarely do we honor authenticity, the courage to say, I need help, or I am hurting, or I matter too. Somewhere along the way, we stopped seeking love and started seeking admiration. We traded being known for being praised, and so many of us now live lives where we are seen but not seen, valued but not understood, surrounded yet deeply alone, because we learned to be admired instead of loved. And admiration is a cold substitute for belonging. But the body eventually grows tired of performing. It begins to whisper the truth you've long avoided. The cost of disappearing is your own life. There comes a moment, usually late at night, when the world finally falls quiet, when you realize you don't actually know what you feel. Not because the feelings aren't there, but because you've spent so long pushing them down, smoothing them out, translating them into something more acceptable. You learned to become fluent in the emotions of others, yet somehow forgot the language of your own. You tell yourself you're fine. You've told yourself that for years. Fine when you wanted to cry. Fine when you were exhausted. Fine when you were slowly unraveling. You became so skilled at performing okay that even the people closest to you believe it. And maybe that is the part that hurts the most. Not that they don't notice, but that you train them not to. There is a particular kind of loneliness that comes from being loved only for the version of yourself you created to survive. The calm one, the stable one, the one who never asks too much. People appreciate that version. They value it. They even praise it. But praise has a hollow echo when you know that what they love is a mask, not the person wearing it. Your nervous system grows tired. The constant monitoring of tone, expression, emotional atmosphere, it drains you in ways no one sees. Burnout doesn't always look like collapse. Sometimes it looks like silence, a slow withdrawal, a dimming. You start waking up without a reason, moving through your days like a faint outline of who you once were. Your dreams get quieter. Your voice gets softer. Your body begins to speak the truth your mouth refuses to. Anxiety becomes your shadow, a tightness in the chest, a subtle shaking under the skin. Depression slips in like heavy fog, not dramatic, but numb. Life becomes something you manage, not something you live. And identity, that quiet sense of I am, begins to fade. Without the needs of others to react to, you don't know what you like, what you want, who you are. You are a shape made by expectations. And in that hollow space, a realization begins to form unsettling, undeniable. There is no betrayal more silent than the one we commit against ourselves. Not the betrayals done by others, not the heartbreaks or abandonments you feared, but the quiet, daily act of leaving yourself behind. Every time you swallow pain, every time you pretend, every time you say yes when your soul aches to say no. And it is here, in the quiet grief of that realization, that transformation begins. At some point, the exhaustion becomes undeniable. Not the kind that sleep can fix, but the kind that settles in your bones, the weight of living too far away from yourself. And it is here, in this quiet heaviness, that something begins to shift, not dramatically, not all at once, more like a small voice inside you that has been whispering for years, finally becoming loud enough to hear. It asks a simple question: what if you stopped abandoning yourself? Healing does not begin with a grand declaration. It begins with a pause, a breath, a moment where you allow yourself to feel something you would normally push away. Maybe it's sadness, maybe it's anger, maybe it's the realization that you have needs, and that those needs are not flaws. The nervous system, once conditioned to equate self-expression with danger, needs time to learn safety again. You are not rewiring your personality, you are rewiring your survival instincts. One day, you catch yourself wanting to say, "It's fine," and instead you pause. You stay, you allow the discomfort. This is what psychologists call distress tolerance, the ability to remain present with emotion rather than escaping it. At first, it feels unnatural, almost wrong, because your body remembers a time when honesty cost you love. But slowly, gently, the body learns that today is not yesterday. You begin naming your needs quietly, softly, without apology. "I'm tired. I need time. That hurt me." At first, your voice shakes, your chest tightens, your heart races. But the world doesn't end, and each time you speak for yourself, the foundation grows a little stronger beneath your feet. Boundaries become less about pushing people away and more about choosing not to abandon yourself for them. They become a quiet act of self-respect, a way of saying, "My inner world matters too." There will be relapses, days where you shrink again, moments where the old instinct to disappear returns. But healing is not linear, it is a returning, again and again, to the self you left behind. And slowly, something remarkable happens. You begin to recognize yourself, your preferences, your voice, your desires, your feelings, the person beneath the mask. Not a new person, but the one you were always meant to be. You don't need to become someone new. You only need to come home. And now, with the return underway, a final truth begins to unfold. A truth not about survival, but about the meaning of love itself. There is a moment, sometimes quiet, sometimes overwhelming, when you finally look at yourself without the old narrative, without the old conditioning, without the old ache of needing to earn your place in the world. It feels unfamiliar at first, almost frightening, because for so long your worth was measured by how well you protected others from discomfort, how gently you folded yourself, how quietly you existed. You lived as though love was something delicate, something that could break if you asked too much of it. But now, standing here, after everything you've seen about yourself, a different truth begins to surface. You were never difficult to love. You simply learned to love everyone else before you ever learned to love yourself. And that's the tragedy, isn't it? Not that you were unloved, but that you never believed your own heart deserved the same tenderness you gave so freely. You spent years offering shelter to storms that weren't yours. Years being the soft place for others to fall, while no one thought to ask where you rested. You were the lighthouse, steady, constant, guiding others home while your own shoreline eroded quietly in the dark. But light does not lose its worth simply because it shines outward. The love you gave was never the problem. The problem was believing you were unworthy of receiving it. And now, you begin to see the shape of your life differently, not as a story of self-erasure, but as one of returning, of remembering, of coming back to the child who once stood at the edge of a room and chose silence, because silence felt safest. You can stand beside them now. you can tell them they no longer need to disappear. Healing is not dramatic. It is not loud. It is not a sudden reclaiming of self. It is the slow, steady, courageous act of choosing to stay with yourself even when it feels unfamiliar. Even when guilt whispers, even when fear rises, healing is choosing to belong to yourself first. And when you do, something extraordinary happens. Relationships change, boundaries form, your voice strengthens, and love, real love, begins to feel possible. Not the love that demands your silence, not the love that requires you to shrink, but the love that sees you, all of you. So now the question lingers, gentle but impossible to ignore. What would happen if, just once, you chose you?